A god of the earth and vegetation, Osiris symbolized in his death the yearly drought and in his miraculous rebirth the periodic flooding of the Nile and the growth of grain. He was a god-king who was believed to have given Egypt civilization. Osiris was the first child of Nut and Deb, and therefore the brother of Seth, Nephthys, and Isis. He was married to his sister, Isis. He was also the father of Horus and Anubis. These traditions state that Nephthys, mother of Anubis, assumed the form of Isis, seduced him, perhaps with wine, and she became pregnant with Anubis. The oldest religious texts refer to Osiris as the great god of the dead, and throughout these texts it is assumed that the reader will understand that he once possessed human form and lived on earth. As the first son of Geb, the original king of Egypt, Osiris inherited the throne when Geb abdicated. At this time the Egyptians were barbarous cannibals and uncivilized. Osiris saw this and was greatly disturbed. Therefore, he went out among the people and taught them what to eat, the art of agriculture, how to worship the gods, and gave them laws. Thoth helped him in many ways by inventing the arts and sciences and giving names to things. Osiris was Egypt's greatest king who ruled through kindness and persuasion. Having civilized Egypt, Osiris traveled to other lands, leaving Isis as his regent, to teach other peoples what he taught the Egyptians. During Osiris' absence, Isis was troubled with Seth's plotting to acquire both her and the throne of Egypt. Shortly after Osiris returned to Egypt, in the 28th year of his reign, on the 17th day of the month of Hathor, late September or November, Seth and 72 conspirators murdered him. They then threw the coffin in which he was murdered into the Nile, with his divine body still inside. Isis, with the help of her sister Nephthys, and Anubis, and Thoth, magically located Osiris' body. Upon learning that his brother's body was found, Seth went to it and tore it into 14 pieces and scattered them throughout Egypt. Isis once again found every part of his body, save his phallus. It had been eaten by the now cursed Nile fish. She magically reassembled Osiris and resurrected him long enough to be impregnated by him so that she could give birth to the new king Horus. Seth of course was not willing to surrender the throne of Egypt to the youthful Horus, and thus a tribunal of gods met to decide who was the rightful king. The trial lasted 80 years. Eventually, through Isis' cunning, she won the throne for her son. Osiris meanwhile had become the king of the afterlife. He was believed to be willing to admit all people to the Duat, the gentle, fertile land in which the righteous dead lived, that had lived a good and correct life upon earth, and had been buried with appropriate ceremonies under the protection of certain amulets, and with the proper recital of certain divine words and words of power. His realm was said to lie beneath Nun, in the northern heavens or in the west. It is as the king of the afterlife that Osiris gained his supreme popularity. He was originally a minor god of Middle Egypt, especially in comparison to the gods of Heliopolis and Hermopolis, etc. Noting his increasing popularity, and sensing that Osiris would one day eclipse the adoration of their own gods, the priests of these cities adopted him into their own cosmogonies. The elements of his story was seen as symbolic of real events that happened in Egypt. With his original association to agriculture, his death and resurrection were seen as symbolic of the annual death and regrowth of the crops and the yearly flooding of the Nile. The sun too, with its daily rebirth and death, was associated with Osiris. His rivalry with his brother Seth, the god of storms and the desert, was symbolic of the eternal war between the fertile lands of the Nile Valley and the barren desert lands just beyond. The pharaoh of Egypt was called Horus, while his deceased father was the new Osiris. Several festivals during the year were held in Egypt, in celebration of Osiris. One, held in November, celebrated his beauty. Another, called the Fall of the Nile, was a time of mourning. As the Nile receded, the Egyptians went to the shore to give gifts and show their grief over his death. When the Nile began to flood again, another festival honoring Osiris was held, whereby small shrines were cast into the river and the priests poured sweet water in the Nile, declaring that the god was found again. The name Osiris is the Greek corruption of the Egyptian name Asar, or Yizar. There are several possibilities as to what this name means. The strength of the eye is one. Another is he sees the throne. The oldest and simplest form of the name is the hieroglyph of the throne over an eye. There are at least 158 versions of the name. At one point the first syllable of the name was pronounced AUS or US and may have gained the meaning of the word USR, strength, might, power. At this time the Egyptians supposed the name to mean something like the strength of the eye, i.e., the strength of the sun god Ra. Another possibility raised by an ancient hymn's author is that the name Un-Nefer, another name by which Osiris was known, comes from the root sun, to open, to appear, to make manifest, and Nephru, good things. The author then wrote these lines in his hymn to the god: Thy beauty mocketh itself manifest in thy person to rouse the gods to life in thy name Unnefer. In any case, even to the ancients, the origin of Osiris' Egyptian name is a mystery. Osiris was usually portrayed as a bearded, mummified human with green skin and wearing the Atef crown. His hands emerge from the mummy wrappings and hold the flail and crook. On behalf of Sharri Plaza, thank you for visiting and please come again. You are very much appreciated.